I've reached the end of your book, and there's so many things that I need to ask you. Sometimes I'm afraid of what you might tell me. Sometimes I'm afraid that you'll tell me that this is not a work of fiction. I can only hope that the answers will come to me in my sleep. I hope that when the world comes to an end, I can breathe a sigh of relief, because there will be so much to look forward to.
Happy heresies, my beloved truth seekers. Welcome to the last show ever of Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis on this approximately Saturday, May 3rd, the year of our Demiurge 2008. You heard it right, the last show. This is the last show. It's almost the end of a 2-year dark odyssey through the gnashing rocks of orthodoxy. This is it, and I truly thought it would be the end. It is, but it isn't. You see, something wonderful is going to replace it. The virtual Alexandria cannot be burned down, and Hypatia hasn't made it home yet. Abraxas and his mortal reincarnation are returning with a retooled, revamped, and re-etherealized program.
I was going to the worst place in the world, and I didn't even know it yet.
The decision wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination. I received many emails and posts that polished my heart. I'll never be thankful enough for your support. But I still knew I was at a major crossroads in my life, that my emotional awareness was very real. So I did all I could do to figure this out. I meditated upon this, performed a shamanistic entheogen ritual, prayed, discussed it with my friends and close ones, waited for a sign, but nothing happened. Well, besides those moments of touching the transcendental. Yet, as always, the answer was right in front of my nostrils. The reality is that what made me change my mind was getting outside of my ego, which perhaps all my searching aided me in anyway, and hearing 3 words that I'd almost forgotten about.
Choose your next words carefully, Leonidas. They may be your last.
3 words that truly began this venture on Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis. Follow your bliss. And as Joseph Campbell, who coined the term, said, following your bliss is what you need to be doing right now in order to be yourself, your true self. That way your soul will eventually enter the larger stream of life and understand the reality of death and the great journey beyond. We are cast into this world with the purpose of knowing ourselves so we can be ourselves. That is the motion and rest of the divinity inside of us. Following your bliss means new doors will open in places you could never imagine before.
We can never see past the choices we don't understand.
Poverty, doubt, isolation don't really matter because, as Gnostics, we're already allogenes or strangers in an alien universe. But each one of us has a way to spread our own holy light to others while he or she can. No exceptions. Divided we stand, together we rise.
300 years ago, you'd have been burned at the stake.
And thus I continue to fight the good fight, finish the race, and keep the faith, unless outer forces bring me down, namely Jehovah and his soothing lullaby that makes us forget our true destiny.
Why does God hate me?
And the name of the show and its new look, which I know will tickle your fancy panties, is called Aeon Byte. That's it, Aeon Byte. Aeon stands for something ancient, but it also stands for the eternal and beyond all mundane realities. It's a domain higher than all the gods, angels, and spirits that clog the multiverse with their demands, desires, and dooms. The Aeons are the personhoods and potentials of the true mother and father of all that is and all that isn't.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
Now Byte, with a Y, represents something new in contrast, something of our postmodern civilization. Yet it is also eternal, although it is a fast-moving force towards a real goal, like each one of us is attempting to do here at the virtual Alexandria. Aeon Byte is a mixture of two forces of motion and rest, as the Gospel of Thomas calls the kingdom of the Father, that are truly representative of the Gnostic revival. Sure, that's what I've been calling the music segments, but now in the virtual Alexandria it is all-encompassing. So welcome to Aeon Byte, my beloved truth seekers. Welcome to Still a Dream of You, where we sail towards the farther shore, all the way into the divine imagination inside and outside of us.
When someone asks you if you're a god, you say, yes!
Oh, and being politically correct had nothing to do with it. I'm still smoking as we speak. I'm still filling my veins with the acrid fuel of caffeine.
Coffee's for closers only.
And we're still searching with an edge, with anger, with passion, with everything we've got for the salvific knowledge that is Gnosis.
For that arrogance, I shall see you dead.
Did I have ulterior motives? Good or bad marketing skills? Selling out? Baiting the customer? Rising to another level, perhaps? Was I getting more serious for our guests and their future? Trying something new? Perhaps a shot of spiritual steroids after a tiresome 2 years? Well, you'll just have to think about that one.
Go ahead and run! Run home and cry to Mama!
I'm sure there will be these and more speculations, but it seems right to me. The dice has been rolled, and I do hope they weren't loaded from the very beginning by the Archons when I started this venture. Either way, sit back and relax, my beloved truth seekers. It might take time to get used to Aeon Byte, but our new homepage is certainly easier to navigate through if you hadn't already noticed. Light up your favorite plant substance, perhaps an American Spirit or contraband Cuban. Put some renewing liquid in your favorite mug, and don't forget that the search for Gnosis is all that matters, not the names, changes, and appearances of a shifting world of siren illusions.
Sorry, Quaid. Your whole life is just a dream.
Like the Gospel of Philip says, names given to the worldly are very deceptive, for they divert our thoughts from what is correct to what is incorrect. Thus one who hears the word God does not perceive what is correct, but perceives what is incorrect. So also with the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and life, and light, and resurrection, and the Church, and all the rest. People do not perceive what is correct, but they perceive what is incorrect, unless they have come to know what is correct. The names which are heard are in the world. They deceive. If they were in the Aeon, they would not at no time be used as names in the world, nor were they set among worldly things. They have an end in the Aeon.
Hoisted by my own petard.
And furthermore, the Gospel of Philip says, truth did not come into the world naked, but it came in types and images. The world will not receive truth in any other way. There is a rebirth and an image of rebirth. It is certainly necessary to be born again through the image. Which one? Resurrection. The image must rise again through the image. The bridal chamber and the image must enter through the image into the truth. This is the restoration.
What if this is as good as it gets?
I believe the show is being restored, finding rebirth in a better image, and resurrected for your benefit, my beloved truth seekers. Let me know what you think.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
So follow your bliss. Those doors will open, I promise you. Keep writing your own gospel and living your own myth. And today our guest has taken writing his own gospel one step further. Our guest has written the first blatantly historical Bible novel on the ministry of Jesus, but with the Gnostic Jesus as the main hero, not the literalist one that barks about sin and the law and contradicts himself when orthodoxy claims he never does.
Long live Aslan!
And this novel is called The Hidden Passion, written by L.Caruana. And what a first-class piece of fiction it is besides an epic voyage through Gnostic reasoning and theology. What makes The Hidden Passion so special is that Caruana directly utilizes the Nag Hammadi library, other Gnostic texts, the Old Testament, the Gospel of John, and the Church Fathers directly as the dialog between all the characters. For Gnostic veterans, this will be a treat like no other treat. For you Green Gnostics, this is an excellent way to learn about the Gnostic texts, their context, and their hidden messages, since everything is referenced.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Oh, you betcha, yeah. Yeah.
And it's a very well-written novel that will take you back into the accurate history of those early days of proto-Christianity, packed with all the characters we've come to love, including Mary Magdalene, Pontius Pilate, King Herod, Peter the Rockhead, Salome, the Sons of Thunder, John the Baptist, and so forth. Heck, we even have the Demiurge and his satanic court plotting against the cosmic Christ while he brings spiritual liberation to the backwaters of the Roman Empire.
If I were creating a world, I wouldn't mess about with butterflies and daffodils. I would have started with lasers. 8 o'clock, day one.
Finally, my beloved truth seekers, finally, we have an unapologetic, direct Gnostic fiction with all the bells and whistles. It's about time. Although Kai Longfellow's A Secret Magdalene does come close as far as the Gnostic cries. Grab your ankles, Mel, because here we come with a harder path, a grimmer ideology, but a better truth in the end. For more information on The Hidden Passion and other works of Lawrence, please visit GnosticQ.cam. So it's just Gnostic and the letter Q.cam. You'll find excerpts of The Hidden Passion, so you can make up your own mind. In fact, let me read you the back sleeve of the book to drive the ambitious brilliance of this novel. This is the tale of the Gnostic Christ, based on the ancient sources. In a compelling narrative, L.Caruana seamlessly weaves over 1,500 sayings from the Nag Hammadi text to recount the hidden passion of the Gnostic Savior. Wandering around Galilee, increasingly hailed as the Messiah of the 5 seals, the Gnostic Savior preaches divine awakening through compassion. But he still must contend with Judas, his dark twin, and Magdalene, his promised bride. At once earthly and spiritual, the Nazarene's love for these two is finally transfigured into a higher hidden passion. Each page of this novel rings with the authentic message of the lost Gospels. By combining numerous narrative fragments of the Nag Hammadi text, the hidden passion makes the Gnostic Gospels come alive. Complete with a map, diagram, and glossary, this novel elucidates the Gnostic worldview in an elegant, engaging narrative.
But now you know the rest of the story.
Isn't it wonder how many great scholars, artists, and visionaries are out there that we still don't know about? But that's the beauty of the Gnostic revival or Renaissance. We're growing silently, an inspired plant pushing up and through the tiles of orthodoxy that were laid upon the esoteric soil thousands of years ago. The Garden of Eden returns, but this time every plant bears the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, as well as eternal life. And Aeon Byte, formerly Coffee, Cigarettes, and Gnosis, is here to help you find them. In one of the districts of the virtual Alexandria, a new phoenix, with his drivel and all, has arisen.
All right, I apologize. I'm really, really sorry. I apologize unreservedly. I offer a complete and utter retraction. The imputation was totally without basis in fact and was in no way fair comment and was motivated purely by malice, and I deeply regret any distress that my comments may have caused you or your family, and I hereby undertake not to repeat any such slander at any time in the future.
With us today is L.Caruana, and we will be discussing his very ambitious and excellent fiction novel, The Hidden Passion. How are you doing today, Lawrence?
Very well. Thank you, Nate.
Well, thank you for joining us and taking your time. So why don't we start here? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came, how did you come to Gnosticism? or be interested in Gnosticism?
Sure. Basically, my background is I'm from Toronto, Canada, but after I finished university, I moved to Europe, and so I've been living in Europe for the last 18 years, Vienna, Munich, Monaco, variously, and now for the last 12 years I've been in Paris. I'm a visionary artist, and so as a painter, I'm someone who's always been interested in finding themes for my work. And so I think the way I first came across the Nag Hammadi library was actually as a painter searching for themes. But then the text kept on drawing me in further and further, you know. On my drawing board I had the expression, enter through the image, written above my drawing board. And it's just expressions like that that kept on drawing me further. So basically, it came to a time where I really wanted to understand Gnosticism. So I came and I wrote this novel as a result.
But you already had a background in biblical studies, right?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that when I studied at university in Toronto, I studied philosophy, but more specifically what's called hermeneutics. And so hermeneutics is the study of interpretation, but the history of it is biblical interpretation. So, a lot of the courses I did at university were related to biblical interpretation, Old New Testament studies, and so on.
So in approaching, of course, we're over here walking the fine line without giving away too much of the plot, but in approaching this ministry of the Gnostic Jesus, obviously replacing the Orthodox Jesus, what school of Gnosticism did you go through, or how did you handle it? Because we both know there's different schools of Gnosticism.
My approach was to take the Nag Hammadi library and its related texts, like the Pistis Sophia and the books of Jew and so on, to take them all as a whole. I'm aware that there is Sethian and Valentinian Gnosticism and so on, but if you're going to present it, one approach, which I think is the most valid, is you just take the texts which are there in the Nag Hammadi library, and you treat them all equally, not saying that any one is more important than the other. And then you just begin. And so what I did in this case is I studied the text for several years, isolating specific sayings, that any real gem of a saying, like, the world is from beasts, or let your mind awaken, any of these really classic lines from Gnosticism. I isolated them and put them in various categories, until I came up with what I call the Gnostic Q. So if you know the way the Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, the way they constructed their gospel narratives is that, specifically Matthew and Luke, they had this Q list of sayings attributed to Christ, and so they used these sayings and wove them into their narratives. So I did the same thing. I created a Gnostic queue and a list of possible sayings from all the Gnostic texts, and then wove them into the narrative. Now, I do take great pains, to understand what the Valentinian view is or the Sethian view is, but I give equal emphasis to all of them all the time.
And according to your notes at the end of the book, you also based it a lot on the myth of Simon and Helen, right?
Right. That's also, I think, crucial. The main characters in the novel are Jesus the Nazarene and Mary Magdalene. And so as a kind of a model, the way that Jesus, the Nazarene, and Mary Magdalene could relate to the divine pair of Christ and Sophia, I think that Simon Magus and Helena, that myth, if you want, which is a crucial myth, it goes all the way through history. I think that myth gives us the model, if you want. So in my novel, for example, Sophia is basically trapped, if you will, or fallen into Mary Magdalene. And in the same sense, when Jesus is baptized in the Jordan, that's when Christ enters into Jesus, which is, quite faithful to the way the Gnostics viewed the baptism. For them, there was a clear separation between this human named Jesus and this divine figure named the Christ. And the relationship between the two is actually quite fascinating. They're separate people, whereas if you read any Orthodox gospel, you have the idea that, Jesus Christ, he's one person. And so similarly, I think Magdalene, you can actually say Magdalene the Sophia, that there is this element where there's a Sophiaic side to Magdalene, but she's also a human being, So I play with those ideas in the novel, if you will.
And why did you decide to leave the synoptics and the epistles completely out?
Basically because that story's been told, that I make it very clear at the beginning this is a novel of the Gnostic Christ, and so what makes the Gnostic Christ unique? Well, I don't think I have to explain to your readers what Gnosticism is all about, but the Synoptic Gospels, they don't touch on it very much. The Gospel of Thomas, there are sayings in the Gospel of Thomas that relate to Matthew and Luke, so probably in that same queue list, But otherwise, I don't find those gems, On the other hand, I do use the Gospel of John as a source for Gnostic sayings in my book. So I've left aside the synoptics, and turned more to the Gospel of John. If I look at any one, let's say, canonical source, but I'm more interested in the non-canonical sources, the Gnostic sources.
And I'm assuming the epistles were because they were written afterward. Well, the story is written afterwards.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, I would have delved into those, but I didn't want to stretch my sources too far. There have been lots of arguments that Paul is a very strong, all the epistles attributed to Paul are very strongly Gnostic, I didn't want to start digging into all of that because it would be, I want to stick to basically the classic Gnostic sources, and I admit the Book of John was debatable, but the Gospel of John, but that's about it, yeah.
Yeah, the Gospel of John is definitely, or was considered, or sometimes is considered pretty Gnostic.
Yeah, not totally.
Not totally. Yeah.
It balances between the two. But I'm happy that we have it in the New Testament. It gives us the doorway, if you will, into Gnosticism at least. So that's nice. Yeah.
And also something very ambitious that you tackle is the mysterious 5 seals of the Sethians that nobody knows about. Why people are still wondering about. Why did you decide to do this?
Well, various reasons, but I've always been fascinated by sacraments, and so as the novel begins, basically you have John the Baptist, and he proclaims the coming of the Messiah, but he makes it quite clear that this is the Messiah of the 5 seals. And this is my way of distinguishing, if you will, from the Messiah that we all know within the canonical Gospels. So the Messiah of the 5 seals, the question then arises, well, what is that? And that's that gives the novel its entire structure, if you will, because you have the bad guys like Herod Antipas and the high priest Caiaphas and so on, as well as Yaldabaoth, and they're all wondering what the 5 seals are, and they want to seize them for themselves. Meanwhile, you have this character, the Nazarene, who doesn't even know he's the Messiah as the story begins, and eventually he's recognized as the Messiah, and he's called the Messiah of the 5 seals, so he himself then has to discover what the 5 seals are. I don't think I'm giving too much away if I mention that, a crucial text for me is the Gospel of Philip, where it's written that the Lord did everything in a mystery, a baptism, a chrism, a redemption, a Eucharist, and a bridal chamber. It's a crucial text which many people have latched upon because 5 specific sacraments are mentioned in this passage. If I identify the 5 seals with 5 sacraments, that's only the beginning, because going into what exactly is a Gnostic baptism, what is the redemption, which I relate to the Gnostic vision of resurrection, and of course the bridal chamber. This can be debated, and so I really use the novel and the element of the 5 seals as a way to delve deeper and deeper into these Gnostic sacraments, which I think are very, very important.
And Lawrence, did you have fun writing from the viewpoint of Yaldabaoth and the Archons? That seems like a fun part to write.
You would think, but actually it was the most difficult because this is a serious novel. I'm seriously seeing myself as trying to present the Gnostic point of view, what would be a Gnostic Christ. And then you have these characters like a lion-faced serpent, who is actually delivering dialogue. And so I didn't want this to become a kind of campy I love science fiction, but I was not that wasn't my genre, you know. So I didn't want this to be camp. I wanted it to be quite serious. So I made quite an effort actually to make Yaldabaoth, how can I say, a serious adversary, seriously evil, you know, for Christ. So I can't say I had fun with those passages. They were really hard work, actually, in order to get Yaldabaoth and his archons and so on into a kind of mysterious source of evil within the cosmos that's pervading continuously throughout the story, you know.
And Lawrence, and what about Peter? Was there any problems with Peter? Because, as you know, the Gnostics saw, a lot of the Gnostics see him in a very negative light, except for a few exceptions. Did you have problems with Peter? He seemed like a nice guy throughout the whole novel.
Yeah. Well, I accepted this. I believe it's a Valentinian point of view that there are three races of men: the pneumatics, the psychics, and the hylics. You know, and that the Gnostics identified themselves with the pneumatics, that they are spirit, that they have spirit, but that there is this second type of person, which is the psychics, that they are ones with souls, and that the souls have a choice, that they can do good or they can do evil, and the ones who do good actually have the potential of being saved within the Gnostic scheme of things. So within the novel, I see Peter very much within the role of the one who has pistis, the one who has faith, and the one who will be saved through faith, you know, and through his soul, but that he doesn't have knowledge, you know, that he, throughout the novel, he's stumbling and bumbling very much within the Gnostic texts themselves, always asking the wrong question, saying the wrong thing, and then Christ turns around and tests his faith, you know, and so on. Mm-hmm. So I had fun with him in a way because he represents the canonical Christian, you know, who within the Gnostic scheme of things can be saved, even though he doesn't know, even though he doesn't have the gnosis, you know, that he still plays his role within the larger scheme of things. So that explains Peter, at least from my novel's point of view, you know.
And did you have an affinity or a closeness to any particular character in the book?
I'll mention that whenever I describe Jesus, I tend to use the word the Nazarene, because I find the word Jesus has been so misused, badly abused during the 20th century, that the moment you use the word Jesus, it's horrible. So I tend to refer to him as the Nazarene, but if I do mention Jesus, it's always within the same breath as Judas, you know, and Judas for me emerged as the most fascinating character because he, inspired by this Gnostic idea that there is a Judas Thomas, the twin, and so my character of Judas is actually a schizophrenic character, if you will. He's half Thomas, Talma, the twin, and half of him is Judas, and Talma tries to deny the side of himself which is Judas, deny the side of himself which basically denies that Jesus is the Messiah. So I really had a lot of interest with this one character, this schizophrenic bordering between, you know, trying to do good and instinctually wanting to do evil and become the betrayer and so on, which is this Judas Thomas character. So, and of course Magdalene. There's so many interesting characters within that schema of things, you know, but Magdalene was fascinating as well. I think I managed to bring out John the Baptist and Salome very, very well in a way that's never been done before. So I'm pleased with that as well.
How was Jesus? Was that a hard character to execute, or was the Nag Hammadi and all the texts there to help you out?
Yeah, definitely. I think the best part of it is that, as I mentioned, you have Christ who descends into this human being named Jesus during the baptism. And so that gave me the opportunity to express the fact that Jesus is a human being with his foibles and flaws and his desire for Mary Magdalene and everything else, you know. Whereas I think in the canonical Gospels, the moment you identify Jesus with the Christ, and Christ is perfect because God is perfect, he's no longer a human being, you know, and so that takes away the entire possibility to identify with him as a human being. Whereas in my novel, The Nazarene, he's quite clearly a human being, and he makes mistakes. He makes terrible mistakes, and I rather like that aspect. That at one point he actually goes crazy. And they actually have to bring him to John the Baptist because he needs to be cured or healed of the madness that he's acquired as a result of the thought that he will be the Messiah, and he kind of overdoes it, if you will, and believes himself to be the Son of God and so on, but is actually mistaken at this point because he's not yet, that the Christ has not descended into him. So there's that interesting aspect of him becoming someone obsessed with being the Messiah, even though he's not until a certain point, So I enjoyed being able to play with those themes as a result of Gnosticism. And then once he becomes the Messiah, once Christ enters him, then he starts to deliver those classic lines, that you find within the Nag Hammadi texts. And he becomes, I would say, a bit more, less a human being and more a divine figure, if you will, the logos, the word. And each time he speaks, each time he opens his mouth, the word speaks through him, with those wonderful lines like the end will be where the beginning is, and so on. So.
But the main purpose of the novel is still, as you say, to get to the bridal chamber.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
But you still decided to go through the Passion of the Christ. Why did you decide to do that?
Because I think it's crucial if you understand I should mention, coming back to this idea, the end will be where the beginning is, the way the novel is constructed is that Jesus, as the Messiah, understands that he has to bring history to its conclusion. He has to bring about the resolution. And the only way that you can bring history to its conclusion is to know what happened at the beginning. And part of his entire quest is to find out what really happened at the beginning, the fall of man, who created the world, who created Yaldabaoth, and so on. So the reason why that all fits into the bridal chamber is that he realizes how Sophia indeed created Yaldabaoth, and this is her fault. And the only one who can resolve that fault then becomes the Christ. And this is not myself, this is not my interpretation, but this is, I think a strongly Valentinian view if you read the Valentinian Exposition, for example. So I think that you have to bring in the crucifixion as basically, and the entire idea of Christ's suffering, as part of the idea. I think that the fact that Sophia is responsible for Yaldabaoth, and that that is her fault, and her fault must be rectified. That is why Christ has descended, basically, and why Christ, as well as Jesus, must be crucified, is to rectify her fault. And then, of course, redeem her by bringing her back to the upper eons. So I think the crucifixion is entirely necessary for the plot. What I do within my novel, on the other hand, is view the crucifixion from at least 3 or 4 different standpoints, leaving it open, as to whether Christ suffered, whether he didn't suffer, and so on. But, the crucifixion does, in a sense, lead to the bridal chamber. And, the final part of the novel deals with the bridal chamber. I won't give things away, but basically Christ has to decide whether he's the bridegroom or whether he's the lamb who has to be sacrificed, and that's the decision that has to be made towards the end of the novel.
And Lawrence, how hard was it to do research on that time and era? How do you go about it? I'm sure there's a lot of budding writers who want to write historical novels who want to know what exactly you have to do.
Yeah, that was the fun part, is to really deeply research Israel at that time period. I read quite a few novels, actually, that your classic kind of canonical view of Jesus type novels to get a feeling for the geography and so on. I would highly recommend, The Last Temptation by Nikos Kazantzakis. Khalil Gibran did a wonderful novella called The Nazarene. And then history as well, is that I very much researched all New Testament history, which gives you the politics behind the temple, Caiaphas and Annas, the high priests, and Josephus with his Jewish histories. There's so many wonderful sources that give us kind of a glimpse into that world. Of course, lots of biblical scholars, New Testament researchers have gotten into that. And so I was able to, I think, I took notes throughout just what kind of trees, what kind of farming implements, the clothing that they wore, took notes all the time just to give the novel that historical setting, I think it comes through. I hope it comes through.
I thought it came true.
Yeah, I'm happy. It was an interesting period, You had lepers, you had more than one Messiah. That was part of the fun of it all, As mentioned, the number of Messiahs who were presenting themselves throughout that period, as Athronges and Judas the Galilean and so on. There was more than one Messiah besides this fellow named Jesus from Galilee,
Yes, including the Baptists. And that leads me to the next question, Lawrence. Most people still, to this day, think that Gnosticism was a libertine religion. But in your research, didn't you find that there was more of an ascetic religion, monastic?
Absolutely. I think when you read the Nag Hammadi text closely, it's very much coming from a community, whether it was a community of monks, we're not quite sure, but a community that was looking for texts that justified their asceticism, And so during the novel, I'm able to use that because Jesus, as I said, Jesus is very much a human being and has this relationship with Magdalene, and yet the asceticism that's there inherent within Gnosticism continuously is reminding him, that the flesh is corrupt, that you cannot engage in any sexual act because of the natural state of corruption, that we are the creation of Yaltaboas and so on. On the other hand, I do give, during the passages in the passage where I do describe the bridal chamber, I do try to give equal space to both the ascetic view of what the bridal chamber is, whether it's a view of chastity or not, an oath of chastity, and the libertine view, which sees it as an agape feast, although the libertine view is mostly justified by what the heresiologists write, Irenaeus and Epiphanius. And I also try and offer a third path, which is neither ascetic nor libertine, and which is the one I like the most, which comes, I believe, closest to the Valentinian point of view that marriage was actually a sacrament, and that when a man and woman come together in their marriage bed, that this is the union of the male and the female within the syzygy, or their androgynous angel in the upper eons, and that each of us is actually seeking that other, who through that other we will become complete as one androgynous syzygy, as one angel in the upper eons, So I very much like this, and there's quite a bit of justification. I use the texts, I cite them throughout the novel to explain this third view that basically marriage is a sacrament, but marriage in a higher sense, that it's not just being faithful to your partner, but actually that you're realizing your angelic side. I'll leave it at that, although it gets more complicated.
Yes, yeah. Relationships are always complicated. But in the beginning, you also have this monastery, and many of these characters are they like Allogenes and I think Zoroastrianism and others, and they are titles of the Nag Hammadi library. Did you mean for them to be the real authors of these texts? Or you just use their names just to use their names?
No, I basically use their names, but I am aware of the fact that, for example, Zostrianos, that the main important part of his text within the Nag Hammadi library is this visionary ascent. And so he is, in my mind, a kind of a proto-savior. He is someone who understands what the Messiah must do, but in a visionary way, not within action itself, So he's there as the one to say, the Messiah is among us, because he has seen the Messiah within his visions, but not that he's actually a messianic character, But I actually had fun. I mean, during one small scene, one of the bad guys is named Athanasius, and Athanasius was probably the bishop that condemned the Gnostic texts, and so I just put these little hints and so on by dropping names throughout history, so I had fun with that.
And I love your twist with the three wise men. You want to tell the listeners about them? How they appear again? But each of them represents something, don't they?
Yeah. So within this monastery there are three hermits who basically showed up 30 years ago, and when there was a confluence of stars in the heaven, after this confluence of stars in the heaven, they went into hiding. So they went into hiding in this monastery. And they've been there for the last 30 years, and now they announced the coming of the Messiah as a fully grown man. So you're not quite sure who these three are, but one is a Persian, one is a Hebrew, and one is a Greek, very much an ascetic Greek. And then eventually it becomes clear that these were the three wise men, who were the three mages, who were there at the birth of Jesus. But I did use the idea that, well, one being Greek, one being Persian, one being Hebrew, that these are your basic three roots, cultural roots of Gnosticism. Some scholars might disagree with the Persian source of Gnosticism, but certainly, Platonism and Hermeticism, which was influenced by Greek thought, were an important source within Gnosticism, and the Old Testament, the Hebrew source, So at one point, poor Jesus, who is not quite, he's still just a young man, has to confront these three wise men who ask him a series of questions that leave him throttled, that he's not able to answer any of the questions because these three are far wiser than he is. And I kind of enjoyed that scene because Jesus has to become a fast learner within this scene, But he actually comports himself quite well, and they recognize in the end that, yes, perhaps he is the Messiah, and they actually bless him towards the end of the scene. So it's like an ordeal that he has to pass through if you want to leave the monastery, which I think any of us who's been through university, we know the story, that to leave your one place where you grew up and studied and then enter the world, that it's actually a rite of passage, and that you will be tested before you will be able to enter, into the world with knowledge in your keeping. So.
And you take the theological point of view, because it's different, that the Archons wanted to destroy Jesus so that Christ would leave the planet, because in some theologies the devil doesn't want Jesus to be crucified, and some he does. But you take the one that they want him to be crucified.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, that for various reasons. As I explained, that Christ descends into Jesus during the baptism, and it's actually quite clearly explained within the Nag Hammadi Gospels how Christ descends through the various eons, and he descends disguised, as the trimorphic Protonoia describes. And so once he's here, then he's, in a sense, the Christ. I mean, he's imprisoned within the Archon's realm. This is a sevenfold prison. There's 7 spheres that are encompassing this Earth, this planet. And so once Christ is here, he is, in a sense, trapped, and he's even, I can't really say trapped within Jesus' body, but he certainly wants to make use of this body while he's down below in order to preach as the Messiah and so on, and show us, through signs. So without a doubt, the Archons want to get rid of this Messiah figure as quickly as possible. Now, the question that arises then is, are they just after Jesus? Are they after the Christ? Which one's going to suffer? Will Jesus suffer? Will Christ suffer? Will neither suffer? Will both suffer? Will only one of them suffer? Will Christ leave Jesus' body before he's crucified? These are all questions that, because of the Gnostic view of separating Christ from Jesus, you can play with all of these, and they do. And so I, use the various Gnostic texts to play with each of those questions. And so towards the end of the novel, you do get points of view from Peter, from James, from John, where one of them sees the crucifixion that Well, I think we all know in the book of Peter that, Christ is laughing on the cross and he's not suffering whatsoever, So, and that's one of the interpretations that's given toward the novel.
Yeah, and also, Lawrence, you also tackled the theme of destiny or fate. Mm-hmm. And isn't that one of the things that Jesus has to destroy or trick or find a way out?
Yeah, that's the fun part, yeah. Because, the Apocryphon of John makes it clear that the planetary rulers have basically imprisoned us all within the Hymarmene, the planetary turnings which govern our fate. It's quite clear that Jesus will be crucified because Yalta-Baoth has determined that is his fate in this lower world, On the other hand, he does have a degree of freedom, perhaps thanks to the Christ within him. And so in any case, he does everything he can to not escape his fate, but to alter it, if you will, to alter Yalta-Baoth's schemings, that he shall be crucified and crucified in this manner. So I did really much enjoy playing with that, that he is definitely a fated human being. It's written in the stars, what is going to happen to him. He doesn't know it until towards the end. But once he recognizes it, then he begins to do everything he can to outwit, if you will, Yalta-Baoth. And of course, Magdalene and Judas play a role in all of that as well.
And to the Gnostic, what was the purpose of Jesus coming down and tricking fate? Did he give us the tools to do the same?
Yeah, I think, I believe very much of Christ as being the awakener. And once you recognize that you have within you a particle of the divine, the divine spark or the pearl, then you realize that you are inherently free. Because the archons, they rule over your body, they rule over your soul, but they don't rule over your spirit. They don't rule over that part of, which includes your mind, right? That the mind, as far as I'm concerned, the upper eons are the entire structure of your mind. So everything to do with understanding, perception, memory, form, all of the eons which are described in the Apocryphon of John, that through your mind you are able to free yourself of the lower eons of Yalta-Baoth's realm. And that means you can also free yourself from fate, that your spirit. And so this idea of the Gnostic ascent, a visionary ascent, that you could actually, through a vision, escape this realm and rise up into the upper eons right now, here in this life, that was an important part of the Gnostic experience. And I think when they did that, they freed themselves from linear time. They freed themselves from everything to do with that is binding your body and your soul, basically. I really much think that the Gnostics were a strongly mystical group of people within their community.
Do you consider yourself a Gnostic or simply an aficionado?
Let's say that I found Gnosticism was wonderful for explaining to myself my own mystical experiences. But I don't limit myself to any one credo, as a painter, I approach all mythologies, all religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Egypt, Christianity. I don't neglect Christianity either. I think it's very important. And so Gnosticism for me is very important as a way of broadening Christianity because I found it to be so narrow for the last 2,000 years. But as a Gnostic, no. I mean, I very much identify with the Gnostic experience, which is to say you can have a direct experience of the divine. But I don't like its world-negating aspect, the asceticism, which seems to be a natural part of that Gnostic point of view. I'm not a monk, yeah.
You still want to enjoy life. Huh?
Exactly, yeah. Although I do tend to take some of their things quite seriously. That I want to enjoy life, but not to excess, I will accept the fact that, we have to be careful in what we say and what we eat and what we do and so on,
what we're attached to. That's basically it.
Exactly, yeah. But I think Gnosticism is actually, it was dangerous writing the novel because I did get a bit too deep into it, and it is a perverse view of the world in the end. It's very radical. And once you become radical, you end up living out in the desert, that a genuine Gnostic, someone who genuinely follows the Gnostic views presented in the Nag Hammadi library, I think would end up in the desert, that's the only way they can conduct themselves here on this planet. So it's quite an extreme point of view, Gnosticism. It has to be broadened. It has to be adapted, into our world.
And how would you see modern Gnosticism doing that? Do you see any success? I mean, here in the United States, we have a revival of Gnosticism, but it's more through the lenses of Philip K. Dick and Alan Moore and others. How is it in Europe?
Yeah, and the Matrix trilogy.
And the Matrix, of course.
Yeah, I think all of those are very important. Americans are fortunate that way, that the majority of them have the Christian background, which allows them to then grasp Gnosticism, which is like an extension of Christianity, Whereas Europeans, you'd be amazed how atheistic Europe can be, and so the moment that you abandon Christianity over here, you become a total pagan, that the pagan movement is very, very strong over here. But I don't see them moving into Gnosticism, the Nag Hammadi library hasn't even been translated into French yet.
You're kidding.
No? They're in the process of doing it in Quebec, and German, it does exist in German, but, it hasn't really made an impact on Germanic culture except for within the scholarly level, but not within popular culture. So, America's leading the way, right? That America, in terms of Gnosticism and so on, it hasn't hit popular culture within Europe, not that I've seen in any case.
And why don't you give us a list of books you recommend, both nonfiction and fiction, if one wants to understand Gnosticism, besides your book, The Hidden Passion? Yeah.
Having said that, I'll mention just quickly, though, there is a film which came out called Dante 07, or I think, or Dante 01. It's one of the few European films that did come out that had Gnostic themes. So, that's something to look for. It's not out in DVD yet, but once it does come out, you should have a look for it. I think you and I might agree that Kurt Rudolph's Gnosis is a very crucial summary, of Gnosticism. And I really like Giovanni Filoramo's book, A History of Gnosticism. I would say that as introductions, those are the two best works. All the other books I know of, they tend to go too deeply within each author's specialized area of knowledge, I have read, for example, Alistair Logan, Elaine Pagels, but I find that they become very specialized, and same thing with Michael Williams, for example, Rethinking Gnosticism. Those books are not going to orient you through Gnosticism as a whole. They're going to give you a very specific slice of what they perceive Gnosticism as being. Within literature, maybe you can tell me, because, I don't find that many Gnostic novels. I know that Bulgakov has written some Gnostic things, and of course Philip K. Dick is marvelous, but to actually orient yourself through Gnosticism by using a novel, that's where I tried to kind of fill a niche, that this novel is exactly that, that it's an introduction to Gnosticism, and it goes pretty far in depth for those who are already initiated, and basically it takes the Gnostic texts and lets them speak for themselves, because I constantly use the sayings from the Gnostic Gospels to put words in the mouth of the Nazarene as well as the other characters,
Yeah, indeed, your novel is one in a million, and very good read. But I think that's all the time we have today, Lawrence. I'd like to thank you very much for taking your time and appearing, and best of luck with the book.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for picking up on it, because I hope that other people will as well. So thank you very much.
I hope so too. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. L.Caruana on the first ever tale of what the Gnostic Jesus' ministry might have looked like. And with 1,500 references to Gnostic texts and years of research and work, he makes an impermeable case that this is how it would have happened. And the passion ending is like none other you will ever experience. And I mean experience. I do hope Lawrence publishes the Gnostic Q someday, perhaps finally getting us closer to a uniform Gnostic theology instead of the much debated rainbow of doctrines you find in the Nag Hammadi library and whatever else people are making up these days. Do you hear me, Lawrence? Again, visit GnosticQ.com for more information on this Gnostic fiction of the true Logos. Let's make this book a presence in the Gnostic community. Like Valis by Philip K. Dick, Kai Longfellow's The Secret Magdalene, or Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy's The Gospel of the Second Coming, this book should be on your shelf of all your authentic brazen Gnostic fiction. As for me, on Aeon Byte, formerly known as Coffee, Cigarettes, and Nooses, I apologize for talking too much about myself in the first segment. Please forgive me, but I thought I owed you an explanation. I hope you digest smoothly this clarification and we can move on to greener pastures, or at least ones with less egoistic manure. Believe me, some of the future programs will shock and stimulate your spiritual ovaries in the next few weeks. And Abraxas isn't about to lose his edge and become some new age cotton candy guru who feeds you positive but unrealistic baby food. We are still the Gnostics. We follow those searching for the truth and avoid those who have found it. We laugh at the gods, smile at the cosmic joke played upon us that one day will turn the tables on, and weep at the suffering of our brothers and sisters in the Black Iron Prison, the Machine, the Matrix, or the Dark City, or just this lonely planet called Oath. We seek the resurrection before death and divinity before a fulfilled materialistic life. And more than anything, we want to go home, because this place is not home, but a bridge we must cross and not build upon. Drop your attachments and follow your bliss. Like the secret book of James says, pay attention to the word, understand knowledge, love life, and no one will persecute you, nor will anyone oppress you other than you yourselves. In some respects, I ended up persecuting myself, but don't we all? I am still Abraxas, broadcasting from the virtual Alexandria. The road is ended, the song is over. Thought I'd have something more to say. But don't cultivate any troubles, my beloved truth seekers, because like heaven above you, the spy that love you, I'm keeping all of your secrets safe with me tonight. Hello and goodbye as always.
Vanity is definitely my favorite sin.
So that's it. After all this time, a switch goes off just like that.
You see, none of it was real. It was illusion. Your art, your science, it was all a nightmare. Now it's done. Finished.
Are you a God-fearing man, Senator? That's such a strange phrase. I've always thought of God as a teacher, as a bringer